Welcome to episode 157 of The Route. The Route is a glorified coffee chat and podcast form that takes you from A to B with a new guest every episode. I'm your host, Chris Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin, as always, just a couple things to cover. Where is the pod available? So if you're watching now, you know, but just for maybe other platforms you aren't aware of, we're on all major audio platforms. I believe there's 10 or 11 at the moment. It's Google, Spotify, Amazon, uh, Apple, etc. There's like 6 other audios. We're also on YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube, it says at the top here at the Routecast. That's our social handles and where you can find us on YouTube. And then there you'd see like the full episode in video format. And it's good to follow along there. Follow, like, subscribe, comment. Allows the podcast to grow a little bit easier with more engagements. And following that, as I mentioned there, I was just saying at the Routecast. That's our platform. That's our handle on social media as well. So all the typical ones: Instagram, Facebook, etc., Twitter. But the one that I think is most important, especially for this type of content, is LinkedIn. So we have a LinkedIn page at the Routecast where each week I post the episode there and maybe have a little 1 to 2 sentences just giving you a sneak preview in regards to what that episode about or what the content may be for, so you can kind of get an idea of it. And then at the same time, I tag myself, I tag the guest, and then typically maybe people engage with it, and that's where maybe you can start your network, grow your network, or just even maintain it. So cool little add-on to maybe focus in on. But yeah, with that said, we can now get into today's guest. Today's guest is brought to you by Zoom. In the world of partnerships, there's a simple principle: you adapt or you die. In this fast-paced industry, you can't afford to miss a beat, and that's where Zoom will help you win each and every time. Zoom provides premier real-time data insights for partnerships across broadcast, streaming, and social like no one else. They're always ready, and detailed analytics help you get the upper hand and save time in your day-to-day reporting. So if you're ready to upgrade your reporting today, make the smart choice and choose Zoom. With that, today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who I met through a previous guest, and all together we would have brainstorming sessions every week or so. So that was kind of pretty cool. And with that, they kind of hopped into the real estate world. They started off as an admin assistant and then eventually leveled up to a real estate agent. And I'd now like to welcome someone from Keller Williams Integrity Realty, Norton Ngo. Welcome to the Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris, how's it going, man? Good. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's pretty full circle moment when we're on the podcast, being on the
Yeah.
podcast, sorry, but also, those weekly, sorry, masterminds with Alexi. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to get going, and I know I've heard a bit about your route in behind the scenes when we had all those conversations, but love to kind of get into it a bit further. So, as the name says, the route. Take us through it. Where did it start, and how did we end up where we are today?
Yeah, like I would say, going back to high school. So I went to high school here in Ottawa, born and raised in Barrhaven. So I went to Longfields here in Barrhaven. From there, I would say I wasn't necessarily book smart throughout the years. I didn't really take school too seriously, playing competitive hockey, so that was always a priority as I was younger. But I feel like that built a lot of fundamentals that I take with me today in terms of like structure and discipline. From high school, ended up going to Carleton University for econ, so economics. So I took that for 4 years, 4-year degree, and it was good. I actually, in the profession I'm in today, you don't necessarily need university as like a prerequisite or any kind of requirement, but I definitely look back and have good memories, but also feel like it's an important step in terms of I still take some of the knowledge that I learned there in day to day today. So university did 4 years of that. In second year university, I ended up having the opportunity to do an exchange. So a lot of people will either go on exchange to do like a study program, so like your Europe or your Australia or Asia type thing. I ended up going in second year during the summer to do an internship. So I interned with my dad's best friend at his company. So he owns like a architectural design, construction, and consulting. It's kind of like all under one umbrella. I worked at his company for about 2.5 months. So that was in China. It was definitely pretty eye opening. Like the last time I'd been to China was when I was like 2 or 3 years old. So bit of culture shock there. So I went there 2.5 months interning, and really at the time I didn't speak Mandarin, so I only spoke Cantonese, which is like a dialect in the southern part of China, but it's very regional specific. So most of the country speaks Mandarin, and I didn't. So that's evidently a bit of a problem. So I took one class at Carleton, but it was really to get out of my comfort zone, to be honest. So went there, interned with my dad's friend's company, and it was pretty eye opening. Learned so much, and it was like kind of set the stage for what ended up happening after. So when I was coming back from China, after that kind of 2 and change months, I was like frantically applying to jobs here in Ottawa at the time because like I went in May, June, July. So end of July, I came back. I was on the way back to Ottawa, and it's kind of that weird phase for university students where you don't really get hired mid kind of summer, right? So um, I was frantically applying to jobs, and because it's like a 12-hour difference, I was applying to jobs, and like employers were getting these applications at like 3, 4 in the morning, right? It'd be like 3 a.m. an application from Norton. So that was pretty funny looking back. Anyways, that led to in a job working as at an insurance company, so a local franchisee here in Ottawa. And I was basically an opener. So I'd just hammer the phones and call and generate leads for the business. So it was good. It was like I learned a lot in that profession, but it wasn't for me. So I was like, okay, coming back from China and all the experiences I learned there, I kind of thought like, what can I do here in Ottawa that would incorporate I would say my biggest pros, like being able to now speak 4 languages, so English, French, Mandarin, Cantonese, incorporating a bit of my degree, so economics and that background. And then when I was in high school, end of high school, sorry, I worked for my dad's. My dad owned a restaurant growing up, so we always worked in the restaurants, but we got to meet a lot of cool people as well through the industry. So one of my dad's best clients, he owns like a construction company. So construction decks and fences and that type of thing. So I worked for him, learned how to make a dollar and the hard work in construction. But that leads to what I was saying of like, I wanted to incorporate everything that I've had experience in, right? So like sales, incorporating the benefits of my language, and then really the construction element as well. So yeah, and that led to real estate. So ended up applying to an administrative position here in Ottawa. It was just on Indeed, and they were looking for an admin assistant that was bilingual. So I applied to it. And during that phase, I kind of went through a bit of a research phase of like, I wanted to look into real estate, but I felt like it was a saturated industry. Like there's way too many people doing real estate, which, there are a lot of people doing real estate, but kind of went on like a half year research phase of looking up all real estate agents, trying to get a better idea of the industry and how it worked. And I came across a lot of familiar names in real estate that I'm fortunate to work with now, but came across a particular name that I really resonated with. And I saw him as like a bit of an older version of myself. So like at a different stage in life, but had a lot of similarities. So he ended up ironically working at that company that I applied to. So that admin assistant job. So when I went in for the interview, it all went really well, the interview, but then I asked the manager, the hiring manager, I said like, does this individual work here? They're like, yeah, ironically, his office is right there. So it all worked out full circle. And then he ended up being my mentor and still a really good friend. And I still call him my mentor in today's day. So that led into real estate. And in the summer of 2021, I finished university as well as my real estate license. So when 2020 hit, that's kind of when I started everything. And it was a difficult time for a lot of people, but I would definitely look back on COVID as it set the stage for who I am today. So yeah, it's a bit about my route.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Very cool to hear just to see how all those different things apply to where you are now.
Yeah,
Typically, what I like to do as well is just kind of going back to maybe what you started sharing, and we'll get to
yeah,
where we are today. So I guess
yeah,
going back to when you're going to Carleton, right? You said you
yeah,
were in econ. And I find this funny because
yeah,
I think maybe 120 plus of our guests, no one ever does what they studied in university. I've kind of
yeah. No,
found that there's a
100%.
switch, right?
Yeah, no, that's very
Was there,
accurate.
yeah, was there ever a point in time that you thought you were going to be an economist or like doing a career with an economics
Uh,
degree? Or is it more so, hey, it would be a good skill set?
It's a good question. I would say that I would definitely say that throughout university, you learn about a lot about yourself in terms of like from first year, you're like, okay, this is my degree. I'm probably gonna end up working in this, or if you're in finance, your goal is to be on Bay Street or what have you, right? But for me, like in second year, I got a job in the government. So like, I'm really much like I like researching, fields and really doing my due diligence. So like when I was in second year, I was looking up like, hey, what do people that graduate in econ end up doing? And all roads kind of led to the government. So like nothing wrong with the government. I have lots of friends and lots of clients that work in government, but I just can't sit still. So like I definitely have ADHD, I would say. So it's like sitting still and doing the same task over and over again in terms of like applying direct econ in a more structured environment, like in the government. I just couldn't really see myself doing it. I did it in second year. I worked for a couple departments in the government, and it just wasn't really for me. So, and in our culture, we actually have a saying, like in Chinese, it's like there's pins and needles in your chair, so you can't sit still. That's always kind of what my parents said to me growing up. So, to answer your question, I'd say probably not. Wouldn't be able to work in my field, but lots of they're actually the economists that do this for a living. They're obviously very needed, and they're have a unique skill set that we utilize day to day. So, but it couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's fair. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with it. I have cousins, family, friends, etc. in the government, but I actually, funny enough, same type of thing. I think maybe
Yeah,
it's an Ottawa thing, where
yeah,
in second year you're starting to get that co-op or full-time role in the summer, and you're working in the gov and you're doing it part-time. I did that as well. I found that was my moment where I had a lot of
yeah.
clarity where I was like, this isn't for me, and I think you realize what you want to do afterwards, right? Where
That's it.
I
That's a
think
good way
I'm
to put it.
somewhat similar to yourself too, right? Where I was just working in the cubicle. I wasn't really engaging with other people on projects or what I was doing. And I was like, oh man, like I can't do this. So I can definitely see that. I think going on from there, one of the things you touched on I thought was pretty cool, is just in regards to your exchange, right? I
Yeah,
think initially when you started saying, I was like, okay, exchange. Then when you said you went to go intern somewhere, and I was like, oh, never mind, he stayed somewhere nearby to do it. And then you're like, I actually went
yeah,
to China, and I was like, oh wow, what a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
whirlwind there.
No,
What
for
was
sure.
that experience like? Because I've I made some great friends in university that were on
Yeah,
exchange
yeah,
from abroad, and it sounded like it was one of the best experiences they've ever done. And I found, looking back, if I could do things again, I think, as you mentioned, university was great to learn about yourself, but then doing something like an exchange would have been cool. And then even doing like an internship maybe earlier on in university. And you kind of did that all in one. So I'd love to hear more about that, because I can only imagine what it's like just in regards to completely changing like worlds essentially.
yeah. No, 100%. So yeah, I think you put it really well in the sense that it's a unique opportunity. So you're at a interesting age of, I was 20 at the time. So when you're 20 and you're able to still have the freedom of I call it the student label, like you're still technically a student, right? So you're having the benefit of your in university, and there's no direct like commitments to like an employer or anything. So you're thrown into a really unique opportunity to experience and kind of learn a lot about maybe applying your own studies. But yeah, so I went and I worked at it wasn't to say I wasn't like in unfamiliar territory. Like I was living and working with I call him like my uncle, right? So like he's my dad's best buddy. So like I was working at his company. But it's funny because growing up, we always saw each other and we were around each other, but I didn't speak Mandarin. So it's like interesting that like I knew him, but I didn't know him, if that makes sense, right? So like he was obviously super hospitality was first class. They really took care of me. But it was a lot of culture shock at the beginning, right? Like I didn't speak Mandarin, so I was kind of thrown in the fire. But I think that that's where you grow as an individual a lot, right? You're put in uncomfortable situations. So like it was 100% totally uncomfortable. I tell a story. It was like when I first got there, it's like a north of, I think it's like 13 hours, 14-hour flight, right? So it's like you're so tired. You finally land where you're supposed to be. It was like 3 in the morning. And in China, they use a platform called WeChat. So it's like an all-in-one platform. It's like social media, but it's also like an iMessage as well, if you will, right? Like they message on the platform. And I was communicating with my uncle, and I was like, hey, like I'm trying to tell him that I'm here, but I don't speak Mandarin, right? So like I'm like going back and forth, like trying to call him. It wasn't working. And then like it took almost like half an hour to realize that like he was upstairs. It's a massive airport too, right? So he's upstairs, I'm downstairs, and then like it was just yeah, the funniest way to kick off the story, just an absolute disaster of like waiting for each other in the airport. So, but yeah, it was like super eye opening experience to be able to. I would say I learned a lot about myself in the sense I was always like the whole trip, I was the youngest in the room at all times, right? So I saw it as an opportunity to mature a lot, but also like learn a lot about kind of their industries. And they work in real estate. They work indirectly with real estate, like in the architectural field and more the construction side, but like learned a lot about how their culture is in business, but more so being the youngest in the room, and representing, I would call it representing my father, like as in our culture, it's very much like show face is a common term that you'll hear is like, representing somebody that they see highly of, they being my father, but like more, I'm representing that as well, right? So it was a learning opportunity for me, and I definitely I really enjoyed it. So and then that led to me being in real estate, really, right? So it's like it's funny how all the dots kind of connect, right? So
Yeah, that's kind of cool thing about the route, right? We're just kind of hearing how it all kind of comes together. Um, One of the things you touched on there that I thought was pretty interesting that I feel like comes up a lot too is just that student label, right? And I think the
yeah,
last podcast we kind of went into it a little bit further, where I kind of did something as well similar to that, where maybe more so my fourth year, I
yeah,
really kind of understood the value or that exchange you can have saying you're a student, where everyone's like, oh, you're a student? Yeah, come on in. Or like, hey, like, let me tell you all my secrets, right? Because they're like, you're a student. You're not going to, I don't know, steal them from me or apply them against me, something like that, right? Where they're like, it's a free knowledge base to give it to you. And I had some great experiences, and I felt like those were some of the best things I ever learned was when I met with people and they would just, bring me along or, include me in meetings or tell me all like their processes, right? What was that like for you throughout university? Because I personally feel like I wish I did that earlier, right? I didn't really do it until I was finishing up. Did you do that all throughout university?
you mean
Like
the internship, or do you
leveraging
mean
that
like the
student label.
leveraging the skill level? Yeah, I would say yeah, like I was always working. I think it's kind of deep rooted uh in kind of how I was brought up, and growing up in a restaurant family. Like my parents owned a local restaurant here, so I was always working either for them or with other opportunities, right? So like I would say definitely leveraging, you're still a student, so you're able to I would say one, like the availability, so your employers know you're a student, so you're not like 100% fully um, full-time hour committed to them, right? If that makes sense, but more so leveraging it and the opportunities that you can gain from. I think as a student, it's really important to kind of broaden your experiences, right? I think that in so many of those entry level positions that we start in university, like you kind of get comfortable, right? And I think that's actually the worst thing possible is that you're too comfortable and you've learned everything you possibly can in your job within that first 6 months, and you just kind of like cruise control, which is, in my opinion, where you kind of get you get stagnation, and kind of like it's more you're not growing as an individual. So I definitely leverage to have as many jobs as possible. Like, broaden your horizons. You don't know what you want to do when you're 18. When you're 18 years old, you don't know what you want to do, right? So like I worked in so many different fields, like construction or in sales. Uh, I worked at a local sports store. I played hockey growing up, right? So I worked at my local played against sports here in Barhaven, and it was just an opportunity to kind of one meet people, but more it was like it's you broaden the horizons of kind of the people you meet and also the people you work with too, right? And then worked in the government, knew that I was deemed a student, so like they have a certain expectation for you as a student, so like commitment wise, hour wise, that type of thing. So I worked in the government. I leveraged that to get to know people in the government, and then I realized that that was not what I want to do. So sometimes that's the trigger too, right? You realize what you don't want to do. So yeah, I definitely think I took full advantage of the student label, because you're right, where you're kind of a unique stage in your life where you're not forced to kind of fully commit as a to the employer, in the sense that you really don't. You're in an innocent age of 18 to 21 where you don't know 100% what you want to do with your career, right? So yeah,
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that too. Where you're probably in that stage where, like you're saying, maybe within that first 6 months of that student job, you'll learn really quick what you're doing, what it's about, but you're not gonna maybe gain as much experience to kind of maybe go on from there, right? So I can definitely see that. And I guess going back to your route personally, right? You were talking about how when you're in China, you're frantically applying to jobs. Is that
yeah,
something where you were nearing the end of university? Because I feel like I entered a stage similar to that where you're almost about to graduate, and like, oh man, like my whole life's gonna essentially change, right? Where let's say for 20 years or so, or not, maybe a little bit less than 20 years, you've been going to
Yeah.
school, right? At least in Canada,
Yeah.
from kindergarten, and if you continued all the way on without any breaks to like 22 or so, like you've always, this is my semester, this is my holiday break, this is my semester, continuing on from there. But as soon as you
Yeah.
stop being a student, it's a completely change in lifestyle. So
That's
once that
exactly
kind of
it.
hit me, I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, like I need to find something to do, right? I got to find a job because
Yeah.
I'm not going back to school after
Yeah.
this. So was that period in time you were referring to?
No, that internship was in second year, so I was 20 at the time.
Yeah.
So I
But
was 20, so it was more of a money thing. I wanted to still have an
uh,
employer here in Ottawa, right? So like I had quit my other job, so I was looking for an opportunity to have some. When you're in university, you always want to be lined up for the year, right? You want to have that job for the year.
sure.
So like for me, it was like more of a stressor that I didn't have a job coming back to Ottawa. Um,
Yeah.
I had that like part-time job that I always had, but by second year, like kind of want to broaden the work experience, right? So that's kind of where I was at. It wasn't like I was graduating, but it was more a time thing where I wanted to get clarity for going back to Ottawa. Yeah,
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I guess then going back to that part of your route, I think that's when you started working that insurance company, right? So what was
correct.
that
Yeah,
like? Because I know it's pretty cool how you've touched on it so far, where it really does seem like all these different experiences that you've had to date really led to where you are now, right? So,
yeah,
do you mind maybe just touching on that? Maybe insurance isn't the most prominent thing
yeah,
in regards to what you do, but I think more so just
100%.
having those interactions and openers are probably a huge advantage to what you do now.
What 100%. So the insurance stage, I think it was a really interesting time in my life where it was like I said, it was at that time coming back from China. I needed a job, so I worked at that insurance agency, and like I still know that the franchisee, the owner of that branch, and he's a great guy. I learned a lot from him in that short. I think it was under 6 months, but it was like in that couple months, I learned so much from him as a local business owner. But um, I guess it was kind of a stage where I learned what I don't necessarily want to do, in the sense that, insurance sales just didn't really resonate with me. Like, um, and again, somebody's got to do it. I know I work with insurance brokers on a basically a day-to-day basis. We need them. Somebody has to do it. But for me, it didn't really resonate with you're dealing with everybody's kind of toughest situations, right? So if like a car accident happens, or somebody a break and enter, or something happens to the home, or in life insurance, you're dealing with very difficult life experiences and events that can happen, right? So that didn't really resonate with me, but and I couldn't really see myself selling that. And also, like at that time, like I said, I was 20 years old, so um, selling auto insurance. We all know when you're 16 to like 25, auto insurance is like through the roof, right? So like I was like calling all my buddies, hey, do you want to get auto insurance? And they'd be like, no, man, like I have a great rate, or I'm under my parents, right? And their parents have a guy or a girl. So that was tough. Like I wasn't getting leads that way. But it was a good opportunity to learn kind of and I still apply a lot of the things I learned from him. The owner of that franchisee, he used to work in hospitality, so like the bar industry, and he'd sell and work in conjunction with a lot of the owners. So like it was a good opportunity to learn how he takes care of his clients. Like delivering the unexpected little like surprise gifts, or like taking care of your referral partners or your industry colleagues. I learned a lot of that from him, and like other than the business side, I learned a lot about how to carry yourself and take care of your employees. So he was great for that. And that was a good step. Realized I didn't want to do insurance, but I learned a lot about sales, and I was an unlicensed insurance broker. So like hammering the phones and like door knocking, like I definitely learned a little bit about that, and kind of how to get punched in the face a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah, I bet.
yeah,
No, that's good to hear. And I guess maybe moving on from that, because I really want to dive into your time in real estate and how that all kind of
yeah,
came to be.
yeah,
Um, so let's say we jump to that a little bit, right? I know you started as an
sure.
admin assistant, but how did that initial, let's say, interest? I know maybe not interest, because you can kind of see it forming as you kind of go through your route. But was it something when you applied for the admin assistant role that was something like, hey, I just want a job and kind of go from there? Or it was like, hey, I want to get my foot in the door and see if this is for me.
Yeah, no, I would say. Um, well, one, I would say like real estate's become so prevalent. Like it's become a really, with TV shows and social media and that type of thing, it's become a very attractive or flashy. I think flashy would be the word, like a very flashy job. But I would say like I was one that actually did it from the beginning as a very calculated maneuver. Like I literally I call myself like I was literally a 2-year research project in the sense that like I didn't just like join that company and that brokerage to like jump right in and then do it right away. It was actually very calculated. Like I was still in school, right? So like it was a calculated maneuver, and I wanted to limit my risk of like I was already finishing up school and like paying for that. So like where I was like, if there's a financial obstacle, because I looked up the licensing course, I was like, the licensing course to get a real estate license is about um, 7 to like 8,000 if I remember correctly, and then like with the other startup fees, I was like, hey, I kind of crunched some rough numbers. It's like 10,000 and change startup costs. I was like, hey, that's like a whole year of university plus, right? So I was like, okay, how can I limit the risk in terms of maybe real estate's not for me, but how can I gain experience and learn about the field to justify if it is something for me? So like I applied to that job knowing there's an opportunity to learn the ins and outs, and really I wanted to be like that that kid that is being in hockey, you always hear that term like student of the game, right? Like that kid's a real student of the game, and he's a hustler, right? So like for me, that's why I wanted to get that job there, to really show the other people that like actually, funny enough, at the time I was like one of the first male admin assistants they've ever hired. So like I actually took a lot of pride in that. But like it was more that like I wanted to learn how real estate was done and meet the right people, if that makes sense, to get into the field. And then from there, um, have the introduction and meet the right people to see how to take that next step properly, as opposed to like some people, everybody's different. Some people are all in, jump, don't even think about it and dive in. I'm a fairly calculated person, so I wanted to kind of know if it was the right thing to do and kind of who to talk to and how to do it right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I,
Yeah,
I feel like you went about it just the right way, right? Especially, I don't know what the right saying is here, but I have one in my head. Being a miss assistant, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but you know where all the bodies are to an extent, right? Because
yeah,
you're kind of
yeah,
having
yeah,
a hand in everyone's work. You're helping them out with
exactly.
maybe some difficult projects, and with that, I'm sure you learn a lot. You're like, hey, this is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. And like I
Yeah.
said, that's where you know where the bodies are regarding to finding some messes. So I'm sure like that was an unreal opportunity. Um, and then what was that let's say aha moment, right? You're doing the admin assistant, you're doing your research project as you mentioned there. But when was that point in time where like, hey, you know what? This is for me. It's time to like go to that next stage. What was it for you? And then how'd you go about it?
I would say that kind of aha moment was honestly COVID. So like uh, in March of 2020, that's when COVID happened. That summer of university, I just took so much. I took like 3 summer school classes because I'm like, okay, it was like a perfect storm. Like real estate licensing was online. The government job that I had was online. Like the Carleton University was finishing up online. It was like literally a perfect storm of like everything was online. I like completely revamped my office, and like I was like, hey, this is my time to start the real estate licensing and then continue to get paid. So like working in the government, but also my real estate job, like the admin assistant job, because I was running 2 jobs at the time. I was working in the government and at the real estate company. So like the real estate company was also online. So it was literally a perfect storm. Took a bunch of summer school that summer. And that made it was a long-term play. It was like, hey, for the fall semester, I was only going to have most university students have either 5 or 4 courses. I only had two, or I think I had three, and then three, and then the winter semester I had two. So I had 5 courses or sorry, yeah, 5 courses as opposed to would have been like 8 to 10, right? Is typically the usual workload. So aha moment was definitely COVID, and like that really accelerated everything to be able to really narrow in on. That's when I realized I wanted to do real estate, and that's what it really came down to. Like I was like, okay, well, I'm all in at this point. If I'm starting the licensing, I'm gonna finish and I'm gonna do it right. So really started planting the seeds of telling people I'm starting to get my license, uh, and also planting seeds with people at my employer at the time that I was like, look, I'm getting into this business. So like I was looking for a mentor. I was looking for any opportunity to learn more about the ins and outs. So it's like asking people on coffee chats. I'd like take them for coffee, pick their brain. I would have like 5 to 10 questions I would ask like every one of them and like kind of get their perspective. That's where I learned that like everybody's route, literally the name of your podcast, everybody's route's so different, right? It's like there's no one right way to do it, but like there's typically a couple common denominators, and hard work's usually one of them. So that's what really resonated with me, and that was my aha moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to be honest, sorry, I think I had a moment similar to that, right? Where I finished university before COVID, but I think as soon as I really realized what I wanted to do at that end of a school stage, and I was like, you know what, I need to be done with all these courses. So I did the same thing. I packed up
Yeah,
a bunch of courses in the summer, and then I
yeah,
had maybe 4 or 5 left to do in the fall. And then I was done a semester early where in my view, I was like, oh, I have a leg up on everyone else graduating in my same class just because they're
yeah,
all going to wait till the spring, summer. I'm going to be applying
yeah,
in December.
yeah,
So I can definitely relate to that. But I'm very cool how you went about it. And then I guess kind of going from there, um, you break into the real estate agency world. How did it go about getting that role at your current employer or your current employer at that time, right? Caldwell
yeah,
Banker. Was it a
yeah.
smooth transition? They're like, hey, Already, whenever you're ready to go, we're willing to bring you in, or is this something where you kind of had to push to kind of break down the
Yeah,
door?
yeah. So like once you get licensed, like once I established to them and told them that I was going to be an agent and not trying to work on the admin side. Yeah, it was all in really, and the world of real estate is you're an independent contractor, so like the employer, there's no like downside risk to them, right? It's like they're hiring you on as an independent contractor, and there's no salary, right? So it's like um, definitely a lot of risk for a 21 year old at the time, and my parents definitely gave me some pushback, but because I had an offer in the government, so like my mom definitely didn't want me to do that, but it was after some tough conversations. I'll never forget this. I had a really kind of frank conversation with my mentor, and I said that, and he grew up with a similar background, Asian parents and immigrant parents, and they just want the best for you, right? So like they don't want you to get hurt, right? So like I asked my mentor, I was like, hey man, like my mother wants me to do this government thing full time, but real estate part time. Like, and naive of me, but I was like, with a smile on my face, I'm like, what do you think? And he told me with a straight face, he just said like, if you're gonna do that, like, don't effing bother. I was like, really? Like, I was just like shocked, right? So I was like, he's like, don't even bother. I was like, really? I was like, why? He's like, well, if you can't even trust yourself to make a full time living and call this your career, why would other clients or prospective clients trust you with such a big investment, right? And I was like, instant like mind blown. I was like, wow, like that's so true. So that's when I kind of did it all in. But to answer your question directly, it was like it wasn't something that like they hire you or don't hire you. They want you to start, and you're an independent entity of them, right? So they don't have a financial commitment to you of like salary or payroll type of thing. So it was just kind of all in from there. So and that would have been June of 2021. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy to hear. Oh, I actually wasn't aware of that. I thought there would have been maybe
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
minimal base and go on from there,
No,
but
no, you're
that's
100% commission, dude.
wow,
Yeah,
good and
yeah,
bad, I guess, to an extent, but no, very
yeah,
cool. And I guess before we kind of get into that a bit further, one of the things you touched on there, pretty cool. Where I think I had a very similar moment when I was working in the government. I also there, I think it was the end of my second year. I did a really good job on a reconciliation project that was difficult to do. And they're like, "Hey, Chris, when you graduate, we want to offer you a full time role." So I was 2 years out, and
yeah,
they still kind of offered me that. And I told my parents, my grandparents knew all Portugal, right? They're all from Portugal, so they thought it was fantastic because my grandma used to
yeah,
work, cleaning in the government building,
yeah,
so they view that as the
yeah.
lottery, right?
Oh, 100%.
Stable
Yeah, yeah.
income,
We call it.
pension.
It's a golden ticket, man. It's a golden ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And here's what I did. As soon as they said that to me, I quit like the next day. And I was like,
yeah,
screw this. Like, I want nothing to do with this for the rest of my life, at least at
yeah.
that
And
point in
it's
time.
and I think
And
everybody there's a time and a place. I think in your career where we're like we're young, we're able to see what we really want to do, and I kind of saw that as like um, you know it was like the safe opportunity, which is fine,
yeah,
right? But I wanted to. I kind of saw it as like, what if I actually look back, like really, if COVID didn't happen, I probably would have started real estate later, to be honest. Like I probably would have, if COVID didn't happen, I probably would have worked in the government first, saved up a bit of money, and then done it. But like, what's that saying? It's like you can either like dip your foot in the water or you can like just dive head first, right? So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, and to be honest, I feel like I felt like I did a similar thing to an extent, just in regards to the sports marketing agency I was doing. Was I was gonna do that anyways because it was on my mind. I
Yeah,
was either gonna
yeah,
have to do it now or at that time, where I had
yeah,
no risk. Right, I don't know how old I was, but I was in my early 20s, no house, no kids, no nothing,
yeah,
or I was gonna do it at 40, and that would be even bigger risk, right? Where you had all
yeah, exactly.
um, these responsibilities, and I think if you're willing and it was something on your mind, like, it is gonna happen regardless, so I can definitely relate
And
to that.
and I can see it as like if you're I wouldn't feel good about myself in, in say 15, 20 years from now if you look back and say like, I wonder what would happen if I actually did it. Right. So
Yeah,
it's like that's the sad part, right? Like if I look back on it and like if I didn't do it and it's kind of that uncertainty. And if you just kind of like took that safe route and it's kind of like a um the safe route isn't always the best route, I guess
yeah. I
is
think
the
it would
best
eat
I
you
would say.
alive to an extent, right? You
Yeah.
potentially live with with some regret.
Yeah.
I guess going back to you specifically there, um, very intrigued about that decision. Obviously, what your mentor was saying makes a ton of sense, right? Especially with the
Yeah.
investment people would be making to
Yeah.
purchase a home. But obviously, as you're saying there, that's quite the jump because I wasn't aware of that either. That when you
Yeah.
go into real estate, they're like, "Oh yeah, come on in." Like
Yeah, yeah. No,
we're
it is
more than
literally,
willing.
literally. If you get your license tomorrow, you could start the day after. Yeah,
That's that's wild. Like I never knew that. I
yeah,
thought there was somewhat of a filtering process to an extent, but hey, like it makes sense, right? And then it just shows, hey, if you're good, you're gonna stay, and if not, you're gonna just end on your own. So,
100%.
um, that makes sense. And I guess going back to that, I know you made that switch, right, from Caldwell to where you are now. Why did
Yeah.
you make that switch if you want to get into that? And like, how are you able now to flourish more? Because I'm sure you have a bit more footing underneath you.
No, yeah, I would say that like, I would call it like staging career. So like I think that it was a really unique opportunity when I was afforded the luxury and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to when I did start, because I started from the beginning, right? I was like an admin assistant there, met a lot of great people, and I think that it's a lot of the foundation of who I am today as well. But what prompted the switch, I would say, would be that I just found myself in a place where I wanted to be around, we're at that age where you want to be around people that are either in the same stage of your career or are pulling in that kind of growth mode, right? So like I found that was a unique opportunity to align with a lot of young hustlers and a lot of people that I had worked with or knew of indirectly. Um, it's actually pretty funny. Like the first person I ever talked to in real estate, I was in grade 12. I DM'd this guy. We had like a mutual friend. So I DM'd him and he still has the DM today. But he ended up switching there as well. And it's just a good young atmosphere of like-minded hustlers. So I'm still very close with people that I was with before at my previous brokerage. But yeah, it's just kind of like, I think that everybody goes through that time where they need to grow as an individual and kind of find a lot of independence, I would say. So yeah, no bad things to say about either, but I think it was just like a
Yeah,
certain time and a place where you want to be able to grow, and
that that makes
you learn a lot about yourself too during those times because
oh
you question, are you doing the right thing? And I think that in hindsight, um, very happy with the switch, and yeah,
yeah, I can definitely see that. And then the last question I have before we get into wrapping it all up,
yeah,
what's that like in regards to do you find maybe there's a part of you too that wanted to maybe switch? Because I found maybe if let's say you started somewhere as an intern or
yeah,
something like that, and then you
yeah.
kind of start growing in there, the people that maybe initially saw you as an intern would maybe have a hard time seeing you in a different lens. Did that ever kind of cross your mind just out of curiosity?
At the previous employer, or
Yeah, like I find maybe let's say you're in a student job, right? And
sure,
you kind of develop on from there. Obviously, if you do a good job, you can easily move on. But do you
yeah.
ever find there was part of you where it felt like, hey, these people would still maybe always see me as that young person that started in as a admin assistant, and I wanted to maybe
Uh,
start somewhere new where they viewed me as, hey, Norton, the real estate agent, rather than Norton started as an admin assistant?
That's a really interesting question, actually. I would actually see it as the opposite. I actually saw it as such a unique story where I was like the admin assistant, then I became an agent, and then kind of got my footing, got my start. And then I was always seen as like the kid. I was always like by far the youngest, and like I was the young kid in the brokerage. So I I feel like I leveraged that. I kind of I thrived off of that being the youngest in the brokerage, but I still am. At my new brokerage, I think I'm somebody else just joined. They're slightly younger than me, but I was and still am one of the youngest at the company that I'm currently at. So that didn't change, but more that um, it's kind of that I think it's directly related to playing competitive sports as well, where you have that kind of fire. You want to prove people wrong, and you want to be that kind of underdog that thrives. So that I wouldn't say it was like a disadvantage where I was, but I actually used it as like a bit of that kind of fire to do even better. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good perspective to have. And then to now wrap up the podcast, I have two questions I like to ask everyone
Sure.
at the end of each episode. So I've been saying for 157 episodes now, I'm gonna live until I'm 103. I'm gonna be on a rocking chair, just thinking about all the things I've done in my career to date. And put you in the same scenario.
Sure.
153 or no, sorry, 103-year-old Norden. You're
Yeah.
on a rocking chair, and you're thinking about all the things that happened in your career so far to date. What's
Yeah.
one story that would stand out to you that you'd be able to remember at 103, where you'd be like, wow, I can't believe that was a moment in my life at that time?
Uh, so like in terms of any context, like you're 103 and you're trying to tell a very memorable story, or
Yeah, in regards to your career. So
yeah,
I don't know, maybe it was your first sale, maybe it was that transition process, maybe when you're doing all
yeah,
those classes,
yeah,
those
yeah,
two jobs,
yeah. I
etc.
would
Just a fun
say
moment. Yeah.
this one story. I'll never forget this actually. So it was like so day one in the business. I had a good a good friend of mine from high school. I'd known him since grade seven, so very good friend. And their family, they had purchased a new home, and um, they were in the process of moving to their new place, but they need to sell their family home. So I went in. I brought my mentor alongside with me as well. We interviewed for it. It went well. I felt like it went well. Ended up not coming together in terms of like commission and kind of the agreement. So we didn't actually get that listing signed. And it was a bit of that eye-opening moment for me in the business. But so that's like week one. Week one, I have a listing that I felt like we had secured and a sale, right? You're early in your career. You're like, wow, like every one of these matters. Every one of these opportunities matters that much more, right? So went in for it, interviewed for it, didn't get it. That's week one. Week two, somebody I used to play hockey with. This is like, so you're literally 14 days into your real estate career. So week two, somebody else that I know from hockey when I was younger. So it's his older brother was moving to Alberta, so an employment switch. So he's moving out west, and we interviewed for it, went well. And then at that time, actually, we got it signed. So we got the contract signed, secured. So I'm like, okay, what a business! 2 weeks, two listings, opportunities, and we got one of them. I was like, not bad, it's okay. And then you'll go through the whole steps of like, getting the house ready and getting it ready to launch on the market. And then like 2 days before we're about to put it live, before it's about to go live to the public, I get a call from the seller and he's like, actually disregard everything that we've done. Something's come up and we're not selling anymore. So thanks so much for your help though, but we're not selling anymore. And I was like mind blown. I'm like, what? Like I called my mentor. I'm like, how is this even possible? A contract signed? Like, what do you mean he's not selling? Right. So then like my mentor jokes, he's like, man, you had like a black cat or something, bad luck just all around you. But anyways, 2 days later after that, he ended up calling me. He's like, forget what I said, we are selling. So proceed. But it was just the craziest like initiation to the business ever. Like, just like a roller coaster of emotions. I was like 2 weeks, these two like scenarios come up, and it's something I'll never forget in my career. So it's like kind of puts into perspective of like eye opening of like it's a business, it's not personal, in terms of like friendships and that type of stuff. And they don't owe you anything. So it's kind of like the ultimate gut punch twice. And like I call it like literally initiation or like baptism into the business. Like it was like super eye opening. So yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Just one of those moments like that where I can
Yeah.
only imagine, right? Where I'm sure there's even parts of you just question, like, what am I doing in this, right? So,
Yeah,
no,
like I was literally thinking, I'm like, what did I sign up for? Like you're two, like, like, they're good sized homes, like $700,000. I'm like, man, what? Like two of these and both of them fall apart. I'm like, it was pretty gut wrenching, but luckily one of
yeah.
them worked out, and you learn a lot about yourself. At that time I was 21 years old, right? So you're kind of learning a lot about the ins and outs of the business. So yeah,
No, that's good stuff. So we went to, let's say, the future. You're 103. Let's go to the past. Let's say you're 16, 18. You're
yeah,
about to walk on campus at Carleton. If you're able to
yeah.
time travel and have a conversation with that younger version of yourself, what's one thing that you've learned to date that you would be like, hey, like young Nordy, this is what you need to know?
Uh, I would say I would say definitely the learn as many skill sets as possible. Like you never want to be and curious. I mean, what I mean by that is be curious and learn about different opportunities are out there because you're at such a raw age at 18. You don't know what you want to do. So I would say garnish as many opportunities as possible and don't count favors. So like learn as much as possible and be willing to learn. So like put yourself in rooms that are um, you know, put yourself in rooms where you're able to learn from high value individuals and professionals in the field that you want to be in. And don't count favors in the sense that, like, just be grateful that they're giving you the opportunity to learn and where it'll pay off in the future as well. So, like, where, trading time where you have time when you're young like that for knowledge is definitely something I would say is, I feel like I did, but I would say that any 18 to 20-year-olds should be doing in those early years of university to be curious and learn from the right people because those type of people you never know might be other future partners or future mentors as well. So that's what I'd say: be curious and be willing to help, and don't count the money. Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And that's why I like to end the podcast with that question. But unless there's anything else, thank you for coming on. And it's been great hearing your route so far.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah. Well, that's it for episode 157. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you.